Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. You're listening to the What's Happening Muslim show brought to you by the Islamic Vibes podcast. And I am your host, Majid. If you find our content beneficial, then please share it with your family and friends. And it goes without saying, please like and subscribe to the channel. And today I have with me on today's show, my co-hosts, Brother Rash and Brother Afi. Assalamu alaikum, brothers.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
How are you guys doing?
Alhamdulillah. Good, thank you. How about yourself?
Oh, good, man. It's good to see Brother Afi is becoming a bit of a regular one. We think, Rash.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, so
he must be enjoying it.
Yeah.
Either that, bro. I get told what to do in it by Brother Majid.
There's always that chance as well.
Yeah, that's the case. But no, it's great having you guys on. It's been a couple of weeks, and there has been a lot going on. And today, inshallah, we've got a blockbuster show. I think I got a feeling we've got some really hot topics to discuss. And actually, there was a massive list. We had a huge list of many topics, but we chose a few, and hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, we can benefit from this discussion, and hopefully our listeners and those watching will also benefit as well. So inshallah, let's kick off with the segments, and I want to start off with the story which kind of went viral about Emma Watson. And those who don't know who Emma Watson is, she's an actress, and she's quite famous for being in Harry Potter. And she's been facing a lot of backlash since she posted a pro-Palestinian post on Instagram with a banner. There was like a picture with like the Palestinian flags, and it said solidarity is a verb written across the picture, right? And Emma Watson, she's been accused of anti-Semitism by Israel's former ambassador to the United Nations, and basically a lot of accusations have been made against her, mainly on her being anti-Semitic. There's a guy called Danny Danon, if you want to. Yeah, he's a former science minister in Netanyahu's government. And basically what he said was in Twitter, on a post, he said, he typed in 10 points for Gryffindor, who's obviously the character that Emma Watson plays in Harry Potter. He said 10 points for Gryffindor for being an anti-Semite. Now, since then, a lot of people have actually rallied in support of Emma Watson, and even some, highly rated actors from the film industry. I think about 40 of them actually, endorsed Emma Watson's message. And actually they gave a joint statement, and which read that we join Emma Watson in support of the simple statement that solidarity is a verb, including meaningful solidarity with Palestinians struggling for their human rights under international law. The statement also said, we recognize the underlying power imbalance between Israel, the occupying power, and the Palestinians, the people under a system of military occupation and apartheid. And they also made reference to what was going on in places like Sheikh Jarrah, Silwan, where the Palestinian Muslims are being evicted from their homes. So yeah, I mean, this was an interesting topic. I've got quite a few views myself on this, but I'll first, open the floor and get your views on what you think about this story. Rash, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I found it interesting. Like you said, it went viral. The main thing that interested me is how easily the Israelis were, their reaction of calling out anti-Semitism without any real thought. These people are supposed to be politicians. You expect a politician. One of the reasons someone's a politician is because they're diplomatic. You would think they think before they're going to speak, and they would probably realize that if I call out something as simple as this wasn't even, in support of Hamas or in support of anything like that partially people might have an issue with. This was purely just saying, having solidarity with the people who are being oppressed. You'd have thought that someone would think twice before doing that, but it just showed their hypocrisy straight away. It showed that, they've completely militarized this concept of anti-Semitism, so all of a sudden that got exposed so badly. That's what made me chuckle straight away. Like I said, everybody jumped on it and was like, people who previously weren't raising a voice on this kind of thing. Even you saw some people going, you know what, the Israelis have gone too far this time. And the people who commented, you even had Jews replying to his tweet going, oh, this is ridiculous. You're not helping our cause either, by instantly coming out saying this. So that's what it highlighted to me. And that's what I found interesting. And, that's how I'd start really.
Yeah, cool. Afi, any thoughts on this?
I'm kind of like torn between the comments, to be honest. They're not by what the Jewish guy said, because you kind of like expect that. I think you look at it and it's funny how they're able to redefine this term anti-Semite, which means it's in its essence, the word is you're criticizing the Jewish faith, which is where the religious term comes. However, what is being criticized here is a state. Where else do you criticize a state and it's automatically grouped together with the people of a religious faith? It just doesn't happen. So, if someone criticizes Pakistan or someone criticizes Modi in India, you automatically become anti-Hindu. So that's the first thing. And I think this term anti-Semite is being fueled to try and scare people to stop talking about the Palestinian issue. And so that's the first bit. Secondly, I think, we have to remember that, and I'm careful why I say this, because look, she's showing solidarity for the Palestinian people, and that is from her criteria. So they don't want to see people oppressed. I think us Muslims, we need to just be a little bit careful by endorsing these people who come out with views against the state of Israel, because the criteria that they're using and what they are criticizing is different to what we're criticizing. We are against the occupation, and we have to remember that is our land which is being occupied, and that's what we are fighting to liberate from the clutches of the Israeli state. They could have been Christians, they could have been Hindus, it doesn't matter, but they're occupying our land. Whereas if we get too far behind the celebrity endorsements for the Palestinian struggle, then you have to start conforming to the aspect of peace that they're calling for, which you can be drawn into unintentionally. So I just think we have to be a bit careful, and I don't want to sound critical of what Emma Watson has done, because at least some people are talking up against it. However, our struggle is different to the struggle that they're highlighting.
Yeah, subhanAllah, man, to be honest with you, those two aspects that you brought up, they were the two aspects which occurred to me when going through this story. And the first one, though, I mean, it's important to kind of make it clear that what they are trying to do, they are trying to make a link between criticism of the Zionist state of Israel and anti-Semitism. And it's very clear that this is like Rashid's word, this is being militarized, right? But what people should understand is that this is not true, because as Aftab said, when you're being anti-Semitic, this is when something which is an offense to the Jewish faith, the Jewish people. Okay, Israel is a state, and the thing is what you see is there are thousands, if not millions, and I've actually met some Jews who are against the state of Israel. Yeah. So are you telling these Jews who are religious practicing Jews that they are anti-Semitic? So I think that's the first point, that what's happening is the people are trying to be bullied, and I think that why there's been such a reaction from many people out there, activists, and even the actors from Hollywood, is people see that this is a bullying tactic. Because what they're trying to do is, as Afi said, if they can be successful in linking the criticism of what's happening in occupied Palestine, in Zionist Israel, to anti-Semitism, then basically that means to criticize what's happening in Palestine, to criticize what's happening in Sheikh Jarrah, in Silwan, what's happening in Masjid al-Aqsa, what's happening in places, within 1947 borders of Palestine, then this becomes basically illegal. This is hate speech.
Yeah, and that was kind of my point, and why I thought it was quite important is that they exposed themselves, and you'd think they were a bit more politically savvy than to expose themselves, because
they're too arrogant, bro.
Too arrogant. And that shows from those responses, that massively shows their arrogance, that they didn't even see the difference. For example, what she said wasn't even attacking the Zionist state, the illegal occupation. All she was saying is just having some solidarity with someone who is being oppressed. All of a sudden, she's not even politicizing it. It's the least that someone could say. And remember, when we talk about we expect more people to speak up about this. I think the reason why a degree of credit is being given to her is because you have Muslim leaders, you have famous Muslim people, you have a lot of people who could speak out who don't. So now and again, I think the reason why Muslims kind of got a bit of josh from it is you get someone who is in the public domain saying something which isn't even politicized, but at least is exposing the narrative, the mainstream narrative.
Yeah.
The fact that day in, day out, our brothers, well, actually, I was watching a program the other day, the number of people in the press that have been killed in the last number of years by Israelis, official press personnel. There was 60 or so killed in the last year and a half or something ridiculous like that.
Blatantly targeted, someone shot in the eye. And you think that they go on about their human rights constantly, yet where is it on the BBC News going, oh, Israel shot this press officer, Israel shot this journalist? It's not there. So for someone, even though as a non-Muslim, for her to come out and say, look, we need to be supporting the Palestinian people in this tiny way she did it, and the snowball that it created, that's why I was like, some credit is due, where, she at least spoke out. But at the same time, it's not like, as a Muslim, it's not, Afi is completely 100% right. It's not what we're calling for. It just, like I said, it just exposes maybe their arrogance and their hypocrisy, and how they're trying to militarize this idea of anti-Semitism. I think the danger lies in what you and basically Aftab said in regards to Emma Stone. Is that Emma Stone? Yeah, Emma Watson. Yeah, her saying this, right, is the fact that she is known to be quite vocal on many things. She's actually an outspoken feminist. Okay, so what happens is that this is quite similar to what happens on university campuses and stuff, where you get certain organizations, whether it's your LGBT or whether it's your Black Lives Matter and all that, and what they'll do is they may do a demonstration and rally around an issue to do with Muslims, whether it's Palestine and so on. And when Muslims join this, in a way now, basically it's a case where, okay, your minority has been oppressed, we are supporting your cause. We are also a minority, so when it comes down to it, we would expect the same type of support. So in the same way, yeah, credit where it's due, she spoke out in a very mild way, right? But she spoke out. However, for Muslims, we need to think about the issue from an Islamic point of view. And we've done many podcasts on this, that the whole of Palestine is being occupied. They're talking about the apartheid within West Bank, within Gaza. Well, not Gaza, but within West Bank, just say, right? However, as from a Muslim point of view, all of Palestine is something which is occupied, right? and we know that the solution is the removal of this illegal state and the resumption of the Islamic way of life within this land. But one thing that I want to just throw in and get your thoughts on: do you think this could be a lesson for Muslims, that there are non-Muslims out there who are more active, more outspoken, and even willing to face the wrath, right, of the Jewish lobby, yeah, when speaking about these issues, whether it's to do with Palestine or maybe just say what's happening in China. However, when it comes down to many of us Muslims who have a true attachment to that land and to the people there, it would seem that they're more active in discussing and promoting and generating their awareness on these issues, whilst the Muslims are not so active in discussing issues to do with Al-Quds, to do with normalization, to do with internationalization. What's your thoughts on that?
You're on mute, Afi.
I think that is a way you could look at it, but I would also say that's probably a bit of a superficial way of looking at it.
Okay.
From the angle that I'll give an analogy first before coming back to it. One of my friends was having a debate with me about how the West and the governments in the West are more Islamic than the government of Pakistan, for example, because of the corruption element. And it was highlighted to him that, look, are the Muslims in these people that you're talking about, these rulers, are they ruling according to or living according to Islam? The answer is no. So if they're ruling according to something else, which is wrong, then how can you praise the people who gave them that alternative criteria to rule by? So that's the first thing, in the sense of our rulers are, obviously they're quiet, not because they're scared of Israel or whatever, it's because they're not for our cause. The Palestinian cause is not their cause. So let's be categorically clear about that. Otherwise, they wouldn't be having these normalization ties and agreements, which are against the public opinion of the Muslims. So they don't represent the Muslims. Secondly, when we look at the criteria of the West, within the West and within secularism and the concepts of freedoms, and then when you put the human rights in it, you will get people from the West who may appear to have solidarity with your cause. And this is what we talked about last time, the concept of freedom, and from there emerges the concept of human rights. And what does it mean? So these people are demonstrating what? They're saying that the human rights of the Palestinian people are being abused. Why? Because they're being kept around the wall, they're being kept prisoner without trial, or there's systematic bombing is going on. So again, I want to draw it back that we've got to look through the face of, or from the surface of what their actions are saying, and then look out basically, is what they're actually saying and what it's built upon in line with us? And the answer is it isn't. And I think that's what we've got to come back to. That, there's, I think it's a hadith which talks about the good deeds of the non-Muslims are like a mirage. Yeah, so you got to look through it. And not that there isn't sincerity and that they don't feel for it. It's just that there's a danger that you're going to find solidarity with them on the surface, when actually the basis of why they're doing this action is totally different. So I think that's the way we need to look at it. Yeah, there's no solidarity from the rulers, but we know why. Their criteria is different and their objectives in life are different. We can't have solidarity with these people because, again, like I said, that the cause and the call is not the same, and I'll just come back to what I said. If we support their call and the reason why they are doing this, then Palestine will be lost. Yeah. Just like Palestine will be lost in the absence of any action to repel occupation.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with that, because that is a danger of getting motivated by some of these actions of, be it Muslim or non-Muslim. And you're right to question what you said, Majid, about where there might be Muslim activists. There might be Muslim activists that may not be as loud on the scene about this. But I would say there's a fair few that are. And on top of it, some of the ones that we might question and say, why is that person, or I'm not going to mention names now, but why is that person not mentioning it? Often we know they're the ones that are, the reason they've got the platform is because they don't mention things like that. If they did start mentioning it, they probably wouldn't have their platforms anymore.
I wasn't talking about Muslim activists.
Okay.
I was just saying as Muslims
generally,
who have a special connection with that.
I think they do. I think Muslims do highlight this cause. The issue sometimes maybe there's an element of fatigue around it. It's always happening. I just want to rectify something I said earlier. I think I said in the last few years, since the year 2000, there's been more than 50 journalists that have been killed by Israel. And I think the other stat was that nearly every year, more than 500 journalists are attacked. Wow. Yearly by Israel. So just to clarify that stat for you. But no, I just think that there's that element of fatigue. There shouldn't be. At the end of the day, they are our brothers and our sisters, and Palestine and Al-Quds is, means so much to us. But when that solution doesn't feel like it's round the corner, I think there could be an element of fatigue by people. And we just need to be wary of that and make sure that doesn't apply to us.
But can I just make another point?
Yeah,
I think someone who doesn't comment on a situation, I would be less critical of. I'll come back to that. I think there's those who are supporting the occupation or recognizing them and showing solidarity with the occupiers where I've got a problem with. Because those people who don't say anything, there could be a number of reasons, whether they're artificially or incorrectly scared of what that's going to mean for their career, because they're going to lose, it could damage their career. For example, we saw with footballers, they don't come out and talk against the occupation of Palestine, but at the end of last season, we saw a number of Muslim footballers come out, so non-Muslim footballers came out with a Palestinian flag to show solidarity, but they won't comment on it because of the public nature of the comments and the scrutiny that they'd come under. And I think in that situation, we just got to make people, and it's not just them, I think Muslims in the workplace, when you're having conversations and you're seeing this in the news, this is brutal occupation. When there's Saddam invaded Kuwait, the whole world turned against him, called him an illegal occupier, and hence had to go in and bomb the hell out of him and get him back out of there. And that's what the precedent has been set for occupation. We've got a similar situation here, but this occupation is being supported and endorsed by the rest of the world. So we've got to draw on those hypocrisies and not be defensive of this issue and not be scared that we're going to be labeled an anti-Semite because of this, because that is just a ploy to get people to stop talking about it.
And I think they've succeeded in that. And this particular, the reason why I said we should discuss this is this particular issue highlights that it becomes easy for them to play the anti-Semitic card as soon as something like this happens. However, they've also in the process exposed themselves by almost playing the card in every scenario rather than more strategically playing it. And that's why the conversation is now happening that, wait there, why is it that if you be anti-Israel, if you be anti-oppression, if you be anti-Zionist, why does that equal anti-Semitism? And that conversation is happening, and that's to their detriment. And that's to a positive from a Muslim Ummah point of view, but we need to steer that conversation. If we don't steer it, like Afi says, it will become a human rights issue. It will become, again, a two-state issue. And all of those things, we need to steer it towards what the Muslim Islamic angle is, and that is the complete liberation of Palestine.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, one of the issues also is that there's no universally recognized definition of anti-Semitism.
Exactly.
So basically, it's being used here and there, and it's the same thing with the Holocaust and all this, where I'm sure there's people out there who are thinking, we don't agree with the Holocaust, but then how can we blindly, how can we turn a blind eye to brutal occupation, which is not even hidden? It's and like you said, Rash, they target journalists. They blew up that. Was it Al Jazeera? Or was it it actually might have been a Western outlet. But remember when they
they blew down their whole building and all
might
their
be
offices.
Reuters, I think. But this is in plain view. So I think some really good points in that respect. And to sort of summarize that, I think the key points that would be worth taking away is first of all that let's not get bullied by this discussion of, raising the issue of Palestine, or discussing the issue of what the illegal state of Israel is doing to anti-Semitism. Because if Muslims are feeling that pressure, then it's just a generational game. If one generation starts talking about it, the other one will, and you understand what I say. You can only get more silence from this. So I think that's the main thing that I would take away from that segment, really. I mean, is there any other comments you guys want to add? No? All right, cool. Let's move on to the next segment then. And this is an interesting one. Quite a funny one, actually. And this is the BBC's 100 Women of 2021 list. Okay. And you might think, what's so interesting about that? This is really bogus, right? So BBC have done 100 women of 2021 list, right? And from the 100 women, 50%, i.e. 50 women, are from Afghanistan. Okay. And on their website, at the top, when they give a bit of introduction on what this is about, it says, this year 100 women is highlighting those who are hitting a reset, women playing their part to reinvent our society, our culture, and our world. Okay. And as we know, when you're saying reinvent is similar to reform. It means basically changing. It means changing something from its current state, reinventing it to something different, right? It's not even talking about revival. It's talking about literally reinventing. And some of the people that are on this list, you get an idea of how pathetic and bogus this list is. So you had someone called Sahar Fetrat, who's from Afghanistan. She's a feminist activist. You had a woman called Saghi Gahraman from Iran. She was the co-founder and president of the Iranian Queer Organization. You have Imam Leker from Egypt, who's a person who belongs to LGBTQ. You had Fahima Mirzai from Afghanistan, who's a whirling dervish dancer, right? And and you even had someone on there who was from Afghanistan, and she was a student who now can't go to school since the Taliban took over, right? Didn't mention what she actually did, why she's one of the most 100 influential women in the world, right? But basically, most of the women from Afghanistan anyway, which is 50%, were women who had roles in the puppet regime of the US occupying forces, right? And basically, if you look at this list, you can see that this is a blatant attack on Islam, and it's a blatant attack on the role of women in Islam. And the main thing that I think we have to understand from this is that when they're talking about 100 most influential women, what they're doing is that they are actually raising the profile of these women and making them the role models, the leaders for that Muslim women should aspire to be. Yeah. And this is something which you can clearly see from the list of the people on there, how majority are from Afghanistan, right? Or at least half of Afghanistan. So for me, this is a blatantly attack on Islam. It's a blatant attack on Islam, on the role of women. And we can see that this is basically talking about Islamic Reformation, right? That they're targeting the women because they see that this is a way of bringing about a reform in Islam. So for me, this is quite an interesting topic, a pathetic attempt on their part. However, it's quite serious. Okay, so what's your thoughts on this one, bro? Or brothers?
So okay, so basically, when I was reading this, again, I shouldn't laugh at all these topics, but it makes you laugh when you see some stuff like this. But I think it exposes what the West are trying to do now in terms of using women as their pawns in the attack on values that go against their way of life. So maybe today's not a time for discussing feminism, because I think that probably requires a whole podcast in itself. I think that would be fair to kind of deconstruct modern day feminism and, how Islam is opposed to it and how Islam doesn't require it. to give women their rights. So I don't want to go into that side now. I think that would be a really good discussion for the future.
Yeah, sure.
But I think for what we see now is that they want to utilize Muslim women as a means of infecting the next generation. So the BBC, you kind of get the impression that what they're doing is those people, like you said, who are involved in when the US were in Afghanistan, it's now doing a favor to those people, putting their names out there for them, who were involved in trying to, bring secular Western values to our lands, to bring secular Western values to Afghanistan. And now that, the Taliban are back in control there, it's that way of going, look, we can still control you. Remember when just a quick reverse, remember when we had that discussion about Taliban and about what was happening in Afghanistan, we said, why is it that America left like this? And one of the conclusions we made is they've managed to change the demographics sufficiently in 20 years that when the Taliban come back, for them to try and even implement any form of Islam is going to be nigh on impossible, because the mindset of many people and the structures that they put in had done sufficient work for them, that even though they're leaving, they still have influenced the place sufficiently. And I think that was through these organizations, that some of these women and some of these sisters even that have been used to push this secular way of the secular way of life. And I think this particular 100 list is just blatant. Not even trying to hide it. They're blatantly saying this person's, LGBT supporter, this person's a feminist, this person, blah, blah, blah. Any Muslim looking at that and going, you can see why the West and the BBC are pushing it. So that was my initial instinct when I read it.
But it also shows, Afi, what do you think? It would show that if you want to progress, then if you want to become influential in this modern day, if you want to be given a platform, then this is the way to do it. These are the sort of people you need to aspire to be.
Yeah, and I think the reason for that is taking this discussion a step back, which is, why do we only give credibility to people who have, why do we give credibility to the list that the West put together in the first place, be it the Nobel Peace Prize, be it the 100 most influential women? In fact, I'd even go back and I'd be critical of Muslims endorsing that book that was written a number of years back. We said the 100 most influential men, and Muhammad Sallam being the most one. Yeah, he, no doubt, but we shouldn't be endorsing that list or that book, or Muhammad Sallam being great, because that book had him down as the first one. And the reason why is, if you read that first paragraph, and I was trying to find it again and I couldn't, but from memory, that first paragraph where he's praising Muhammad Sallam was for pluralism, right? And anyone who understands pluralism will know that actually that is not an Islamic concept, and there is no such thing. So they're praising on an incorrect basis. And I think that's where you got to draw from this list. Yeah, when Malala Yousafzai got nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, automatically people thought this woman is great. Why? Because the West have recognized her, right? But then you look at why they recognized her, and you get the answer from, I think it was the Vogue magazine interview, where she criticized the Islamic social system and the concept of marriage. So these women who are being nominated, and I haven't been through the full list, I've looked at some of them. And I was like laughing all the way through, because they're telling us why these women are great. And you know what? If the Taliban does have elements around, I'm not going to endorse the Taliban, right? If the Taliban is wrong Islamically, then we as Muslims need to hold them to account Islamically, because that's what they claim that they're representing, right? So the women who are on this list are not doing that. They're holding them to account based upon Western criteria and Western principles. So therefore, I ask any Muslims who endorse this list, what are you endorsing? Are you endorsing the women? Are you endorsing the oppression or the persecution that the Taliban are committing? Or are you endorsing the criteria by which these women are pushing their message? And that's why these lists are 100% bogus from our perspective. They're right from the West perspective because they've got their criteria. We talked about it with regards to their drive to push the secular capitalist definitions of freedoms, and that's their objective. If we're going to hold someone to account, if we're going to judge someone, our criteria has been given. The greatest in the eyes of Allah is the one who has greatest taqwa, right? That's the criteria that we're going to hold. We're going to judge someone whether they're good or bad from our criteria, which is halal haram, which is from khair and shar, which is the criteria Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to hold us to account on the day of judgment. That's the criteria for defining whether someone's good or bad, or whether they should be praised or inspiring or not. Not this bogus that the West are propagating.
That's a solid point, bro, because as Muslims, what we need to look at is at the same time you have this list going out and them praising these women, but at the same time we know that Muslim women in Europe and France and stuff like that, the way they're being treated for abiding by the Sharia rules.
Exactly.
So some women are being demonized and others are being praised for being the, for out of 6 point somewhat billion people, right? The most 100 influential people, they fall into that category because of these things. And it's a really good point. As Muslims, especially women, what we need to be careful of is this term empowerment. Because what they are showing is when they're showing that this woman was against Taliban, this woman did this, what it's showing is that these women are free because they did this, and the women that are not doing this, they are basically enslaved. And for them to become empowered, they need to follow, and as it said there, basically to reinvent society, reinvent culture. It has to be reinvented because the Islamic social system is clear, right? We see remnants of it in the Muslim world still. Okay, it's not there in its entirety, we still see it. What they're talking about is the reinvention. They're not even talking about basic. In a way, reinvention is probably more radical than a reformation, because reinvention is actually reinventing the circle, the side of the wheel. Okay, so I think it's difficult because there is elements of Muslims out there, due to culture, they do treat women in a bad way. I'm sure there's places out there in the Muslim lands, where Muslim women are treated in a bad way, where culture is used, but it's branded Islamic, right? However, what we have to understand is that let's not look at this 100 most influential women list. Let's look at our own history. Let's look at Aisha radiallahu anha, right? Who became one of the best, scholars, who actually, correct me if I'm wrong, has narrated the most hadith, right? From her, yeah. Then you had, the Muslim women who, the Muslim sister, I've got her name, you guys will probably know, who established the first university. Yeah. So we don't need to look at this pathetic list to see how great Muslim women are. We need to look at our own culture, and what you'll see in all the examples that we can talk about, why were those women great? And it goes back to Afi's point that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to him, people, their levels are based on taqwa. They were great for what they did for Islam. These women are actually doing the total opposite. What they are promoting is kufr, and it's the works of shaitan. And that's something which, is a message which has to be made clear, and certainly to our sisters, because the reality is that the two targets that the sniper scope is pointing at is the youth and the women. That's their plan. It's a generational game. It's a long game. But from their point of view, if we can corrupt the women and we can corrupt the children, this change will automatically appear generations down the line.
Really good point that you made there, actually, Maj, which is, be it men or women, we have our role models. Our history is full of role models. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has endorsed our role models. The greatest women of this ummah, we know, we got the examples of Maryam radiallahu anha, Asya radiallahu anha, Khadija radiallahu anha, Aisha radiallahu anhu, we've got great examples of women who our sisters should aspire to be like. And if you look at what Islam did, Islam came and transformed the role of women from kufr, from under kufr, to what Islam came. And Islam did empower women, but not just empower women in the same way that it empowered men, by taking them away from the clutches of kufr and liberating them with this deen, which is from the creator who knows us better than we know ourselves. And on that criteria, he will either reward us for sticking to it or punish us for not listening, not adhering to it. And just like our role model as men should come from Islam, and we've got loads of role models, we've got the same for women. So we don't need to look away from Islam.
Bro, the beauty, I would say, is that even the role models, you got me saying medal as well. The role models that you're talking about, the women, the role models from within the Ummah, in fact, they're role model for the men too, because we're talking about their piety. This is to do, they role models because of their piety. And that's the beauty of it. Yes, Rash, you want to say something about it?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think most Muslims won't give any credibility to that list anyway. I think the reason for the importance of raising it in the podcast is to highlight the strategies of our enemies. So the people who are against Islam, like you've already said, they're pushing the women as the strategy to change, future generations. What the sisters need to be aware of, and this is a message to the sisters, is sometimes, whilst I can't think of any sister I know will look at that list and go, oh, look, all these Muslims on this list. It's a good thing necessarily. But there will be some sisters and maybe even brothers that will go, oh, look at what Muslim sisters have achieved in modern times by entering into those walks of life. They're the ones that I would say, if they was to, were to aspire to it, they're the ones I'd warn. And my warning really is sometimes, when you have a dig at, kind of the modern day role of Muslim women more in society, it comes across as if, you men had your way in the past, it's the women's turn. Western civilization is going through a dramatic change now because the woman is becoming the lead in their societies. The woman is becoming stronger in the Western civilization than the man. And the reason why I say that is, all of these Epstein stuff that happened and all the stuff that's happening in Hollywood and stuff, even though we know physically the man is the stronger of the species, what's happening is, because of all this woke culture that we're seeing today, what's happening is the women are able to oppress the men because they know that a man saying anything even manly becomes misogynistic by default. All of a sudden, there's this whole awakening going on, and awakening in a negative way, actually, in Western civilization, where women are having, they're becoming the more dominant sex amongst the two, the more dominant gender. And the irony of it is, it went from like patriarchy to full-blown, nowadays you're seeing matriarchy, yeah? And the issue is rather than Islam, which gives us a balance, gives us a role, the man is got a role, the man is the leader of the household, or the man is the leader of a community, but has a distinct role of looking after the women in that society. The Western civilization is having a clash. It's full-blown men versus women, such that before it was too weighed towards the men, now it's becoming a weight towards the women, and it's a full-blown clash. They're going to destroy themselves because of a matriarchy versus patriarchy thing. Whereas we need to warn our sisters that, look, there was a time they used men to attack Islam. So that's not saying we're immune, like the scholars and stuff that they used over the years to attack Islam. They were men. Yeah. So we're not going, oh, look, women are being used to attack Islam. Women are the weaker gender, blah, blah, blah. What we're saying is they've used the men. They're continuing to use the men to attack Islam. Now they're using you as well. Beware of it. And rather than make it, because they can become defensive. And I've seen it firsthand. Sometimes they become defensive because it feels like, oh, you're just saying that because you're the man. it's easier for you. The life is more, structured for men. The society is more geared towards men. But be careful. I would say to them, be careful when you say that, because they're trying to push you down, making women's role, rather than just being equal, actually being greater, and that's harm to society.
Yeah, subhanallah. And it just goes to show again that when the system and the society is based on your whims and desires and the aql or man, then there will always be chaos, disparity, contradiction.
Exactly. We both have our weaknesses. Men and women both have weaknesses. What the kuffar are doing now is they've tried to use the weaknesses of men over the times, getting them into battles, getting them into issues, and using scholars and all of these things. Now it's time for them to say, you know what, let's find the weaknesses of women. Let's use that to attack Islam as well. It's not us versus our sisters, brothers versus sisters. It should be, wait there, what is the Islamic criteria? Let's make sure we refer to that when the West bring us something, and to know whether we should, be involved in it or not.
Yeah, subhanallah, man. Subhanallah. I could not have said it better myself. And I think it actually even summarized this segment really well. And it sounded advice. And I would say sound advice, not just to the sisters, to sisters and brothers, because we are in a position, if we have wives, we have daughters, we have sisters, we're in a position to protect them. And that's not just physically protecting, that's protecting them from evil and all kinds of evil. So, this is something which we need to take on board as well. So inshallah, I want to move on to the last segment. And I don't think we could have gone through this the podcast without speaking about good old Bozza, Boris Johnson,
Bojo.
Lots being going on. It's kind of divided the Tory party, but as we know, Boris Johnson has been accused, not being accused, he's actually accepted it, even though he's made an apology and lied about it, that whilst the UK was in lockdown, whilst they had family members who passed away, parents, and they weren't allowed to go and visit them, whilst people couldn't mix with anyone other than those in their household. You could remember when a lot of things were going on, even in the Muslim community, in the sense where you had people passing away and the janazah was carried out by guys with white overalls on, right? Overcoats. So whilst this was happening, the stories come out that, the place to be was number 10 Downing Street. These guys were partying mad. And they were even parties. It's been revealed that, the night before, I think the funeral of the Queen's husband, these guys were, kicking it live. So basically, this story has come out, and it's divided a lot of people within the Conservative Party, even within the population. People are, heartbroken in one way, the fact that they lost family members, whilst those people who are supposedly looking after their affairs and managing their interests were actually doing the opposite. Okay. I've got some thoughts on this, but I'll open it up to I'll get Afi's view, because otherwise you guys are going to stay quiet for about 10 seconds. So Afi, what's your views on this, bro?
I think I think this is just another example, and I think the public are a bit, they fall victim to these situations again and again and again without actually highlighting what the fundamental problem is here, right? Because the problem is summed up by what you said a few seconds ago, which is it's created a divide amongst some members of the Tory party. Every one of them should be annoyed with what's happened, not some of them, because what's happened here is you've got something in law which is expected for the average person to adhere to, not only adhere to, is being enforced. We remember the shocking pictures of the brother and sister who lost a child in hospital, and they were being pulled away by the police because they were arguing over it, right? So we've seen people, like you say, not being able to attend a janazah or see a parent or a loved one who has died, right? We've seen examples of, and these are Muslims, like non-Muslims have lost family members and they haven't been able to see anyone. The problem with mental health and the elderly in this country, a lot of people who are living on their own and not having that social interaction and struggling through harsh winters. Yet you've got the elite of society, your politicians, your capitalists, who have shown a total disregard for it, got caught, lied, got caught lying, and then trying to say it's all right. Don't worry about it. There's bigger fish to fry. Focus on them, which I just shows complete contempt for the average person. Yet we seem to think it's okay, the politicians, and we'll overlook it. This happens again and again and again. Happens in America all the time. Happens here. We've seen it with their second homes, with the expenses, and how many more examples do you want? It shows that actually man is not suitable to govern. Man will only do what is in his own interest and what they want to do, while putting on this face that everyone's expected to do it. Kind of like reminds me of the example from the book, George Orwell's Animal Farm, where, you've got, I can't remember the name of the pig now, right? Boxer was a horse. But, the ones that are saying like, look, we all need to pull in together here if we're going to take ownership, right? And stop the dictatorship of the farmer. And yet the pig ended up being the dictator, and everyone else was just like, they just died trying to serve the interests of the pig when they thought it was the interest of the people. We live in a society which is about the interests of the few, and this example just highlights it for me.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it highlights there's absolutely no equality, and it actually reminds me of somewhat of the feudal system where you had the barons and the kings and those in authority and the peasants. And basically, it's it's just a modern version of that. What's your thoughts, Rash?
Yeah, it just exposes man ruling in this way, where man is allowed to decide his own rules. It exposes democracy, exposes elitism, exposes all of these things to me, really. What I found interesting is that when you speak to people, they're kind of lost a little bit. They're immediately agitated by this because it's mainstream. Obviously, it's been on the media and stuff. They buy into it completely because they think, as Afi says, completely right, we weren't able to do stuff. Why are they allowed? So it creates that divide straight away. You get, people getting annoyed by it, which I completely understand. But then that does detract from all of the other things that the government should be doing, and turns it into like a soap opera. It's like a drama, at the same time. And then on top of that, what you get is that, I've lost my train of thought. On top of that, what you get is a lot of people who are the common people on the ground are going, I've lost faith in the political system, because there's a number of factors. Firstly, they're looking at the Tories and going, look, this person's in charge who's just like completely lost it. Then they look across to, say, the Labour Party, and they go, well, look at their leadership. Then they look across to other politicians and go, they're not really, serving or working for my needs, with the problems that we have in this society. So all of a sudden, there's a natural detachment now from the common person. Either they're agitated by it, or they're just going, you know what, it's politicians. So normally, and this is where, when we talk about Islam and politics and things, that's where they've got this notion from. When they say keep politics out of Islam, it's this type of politics they're talking about, because they're going, this politics is completely not, it's not helping the people. It's helping the elite. One rule for them, one rule for us. And so that's why what is important is, like, looking at it from an Islamic perspective. We need to look at it and go, at the end of the day, the Islamic civilization recognizes that ruling comes from within the people, and you rule by what Allah has revealed. And it's simple, isn't it? Is you're ruling based on the rules that are designed for you by your creator. That doesn't mean that some people in rulership are not going to be unfair, because it's still human beings. Yeah. But what it does mean is that detachment that you get. We see a clear detachment today, even in the Muslim lands, because they're not implementing Islam. We see a clear detachment from the people and from the rulers. And a correct civilization, it shouldn't be like that. It should be that the people who are in authority, the people who are ruling, should be from the people, such that they understand the problems of the people. And then when there are rules and regulations to be adhered to, then the people adhere to them, but also the people who are in positions of authority adhere to them. But in this society, you don't get any of that.
Yeah, and you know, if you gotta, like you said, you gotta question the concept of democracy, because if you think about it, we know that you had the Brexit vote and they had the elections, right? People knew this guy was, he was the way he was. He's a liar. People knew this before they voted for him. People knew that this guy is an Islamophobe, if you want to use that term. They voted for him, right? All these things that people knew that, you know what he's been accused of now. This was common knowledge before this guy won. He got voted. And some may argue, yeah, that was because they demonized Corbyn so much. Maybe so. Or because people, they brought into the Brexit stuff. But it highlights again the fact that you had the decision that was given to these people based on erroneous information, based on all these lies, all this propaganda. The whole campaign's been a lie. His whole campaign is a lie. So the guy himself is obviously a liar, right? People brought into it. And now, when you gave this liar the keys, and now it hurts because they were doing those things that you were not supposed to be doing. But I think from the general public, from the British public, you got to look at yourself and think, actually, you know what? We knew all these things, yet we still voted for him. What do you think about that?
It's right. I remember at the time when all the parliamentary votes were happening for Brexit, and he kept losing. And the audacity of the man who doesn't even believe in his own system, threatened to go against the legal system, against the politician, and enforce the Brexit anyway, despite not getting agreement from the politicians on the agreement that he wanted, and then should disregard the fact that actually I don't care if this is against the law. I'm just going to push it through. So you've got, and this highlights capitalism, I guess, and democracy. You've got the Prime Minister heading up the system of democracy, if you want to call it, even though it doesn't really exist, right? Who disregards it. He goes, I'm not bothered about the laws. Yeah. And he's openly saying it. And yeah, people are still standing by him, which, I can't correlate that in my mind.
But it goes back to the fact that you said the point you made at the beginning, Afi, that it should be every single person in the group, in the party, Conservative Party. Even the Scottish head of the Conservatives, he got attacked by another Conservative, and he even said mocked him. But the reality is that what this shows that this problem isn't Boris Johnson. All of these people, most of them are like this. The whole system is like this, right? On both sides.
Yeah, what it's linked to is a little bit of what we talked about last podcast. When we talked about freedoms, the criteria of this society is freedoms. So what happened with COVID is that, and especially when the elite are not following the rules, it looks like your freedoms have been suppressed because the common person's criteria is freedom. You are amongst the peasants, and your freedom has been oppressed or suppressed. Like you gave all the examples about funerals, janazas, not being able to go to the hospital, etc., etc. But the people who are the kings and the elites and all of those people, their freedoms remain. Okay, even if they're hidden, even if they try to do it behind the back door, their freedoms are okay. And see, that's what's caused the rift, because the criteria is freedom, and it exposes the fact that freedom was only ever there to get the buy-in of the people. That's why in the past, when the time of the church was there and the clergy, people were being oppressed and suppressed, and their so-called freedoms were being not being given, and then the whole system changed. But what's any different now? It's just a different people doing the oppressing, a different people doing the suppressing of your so-called freedoms. And it just completely exposes the way of life.
It's just different titles, bro.
It's just different titles.
But what it does show, though, is the fact that with freedom, what you're going to, you mentioned this thing about they were doing this because they weren't going to get caught. Freedom, in a way, if you want to describe it, it's basically, doing whatever you want until you get caught.
Mm-hmm.
So, like in the years past, there was some surveys done where these people went on a university campus and they asked the guys, they did a survey, like, if you could get away with rape, would you do it? And majority of the people said yes, right? Because they're using their whims and desires as their criteria. So here now you have a situation where none of these people are thinking about the akhirah. None of them are thinking about accountability, because if there's no accountability in the next life, then do what you want until you're caught. And these guys having a party and raving in number 10, they never thought this news was going to get out. Yeah. So basically what it just shows to the normal person is, look, do what you want, right? But just don't get caught. Just don't get caught. Where's the accountability?
Yeah, it's linked to the Djokovic thing as well, isn't it? Because that thing got blown up because the people, didn't like that. Why is he getting preferential treatment? Why is he allowed to travel without being vaccinated, but we're not allowed to travel without being vaccinated? So again, it wasn't down to the rules as such. It was more down to, the fairness, the justice between what rules apply to the commoner and what rules applies to the people with wealth. And again, they're all just similar examples of a broken system, which is, like you said, controlled and in accordance to those people who have power and wealth.
But and if you look in our history, because as Rash mentioned, we're humans, we make mistakes. Some people even transgress, right? Some people even become tyrants. The reality is, though, there's been good leaders, there's been bad leaders in Islam, okay? However, when we look at statesmen, there's no one better to look at than the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right? Even before he became a statesman, when at a time, I'm sure this was at the time of, either this was at the time of Khandaq, or this was at the time of the boycott in Mecca, where someone came to the Messenger and said, mentioned he's really hungry, and the Messenger pulled up his top, and he had stones tied to his stomach to suppress the hunger, right? So basically, it was like, look, I'm suffering what you're suffering, right? In our good times, we will have good times together. In our bad times, we share it together. This type of idea is non-existent. It's non-existent in a society where it's all about benefit. It's all about being number one. Okay. Look at example of Umar radiallahu anhu, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Look at all these the examples of the justice, the examples of Imam Ali radiallahu anhu, and the issue to do with the Jew and the shield. There was one example I heard, I don't know the reference, but there's an example where there was a court case between Umar radiallahu anhu when he's the Khalifa and another man. And when he came into the court, right, the judge stood up and he said to the judge that you've already wronged this guy. But you standing up, just because I'm the Khalifa, you've wronged this guy. Okay, I don't know how the reference for that, maybe you can find it if somebody wants to know. But these are examples, man, as Muslims, we need to look at, not get fooled and look at the rulers in the Muslim lands today and then disconnect politics to Islam based on them. Politics is managing the affairs of the people. And no one managed the affairs of the people better than the Messenger Sallallahu and the companions after him. Okay? So this is not an alien concept for Muslims. Let's not look at the Western politicians today, the current politicians, and those in the East, in the Muslim lands, and then say that to purify Islam, we need to disconnect it from politics. That's not the solution. I think this is a very important message. And as Muslims, when these people are trying to show that they are the civilized people, the third world is where we live, backwards and all that, okay? In fact, we can show true statesmen, we can show examples of true statesmen in our history, whilst their history is littered. I mean, last point I think I'll give it to you. One of the main guys who's a hero, two examples I'm going to give you. First one, who's a hero in Britain, is Winston Churchill, who has been linked directly to 4 million people in the Bengal famine dying. Then you have Tony Blair, who lied, openly lied. Because of him, millions have died, millions have been displaced, and he just recently got the top honors in the country, right? These are examples of people that are revered in this society and in this ideology. In Islam, these people would be despised, would be seen as tyrants. That's the difference. Afi. I think Afi's frozen, Rush. Or he's just contemplating and
he must be very good at staying still. Okay, I'll make a quick point. Yeah, sometimes, you know, I wonder that I might have made this point before as well. You know, like we say, if there was a correctly implemented Islamic civilization somewhere in the world, then people, Muslims and non-Muslims alike, would be able to look across to that example and go, that's how a government, that's how a country should be run. And I still think that is the case, and I think I will always think that. But then one of the question marks I sometimes have is, I think people in this society, and non-Muslims in particular, they've been corrupted by this society so much that they have this attitude that, you know, when they see politicians do wrong, a part of them is like, you know, if I was in that position, I would do that too. You know, the fact that, you know, you said earlier, their criteria is if I can do something and get away with it, why wouldn't I do it? So if that's already your criteria, yes, you criticize Boris Johnson, and I've heard people criticize him, but at the same time, those same people are like, you know what? If I was in that situation, I could get away with it. I could get away with a second home, with an extra expense account, you know. Oh, it's almost like the animosity to them isn't because they're wronging them, is because they can do it and get away with it, and I can't. You see what I mean? It's like, I can't get benefits or whatever, or get a free ride or a free meal, but because they get it, that's the animosity. It's not the, you know, they're wrong and I wouldn't never do that. So
that's a good way of looking. That's a good way of looking at it, you know.
So I think those people wouldn't necessarily look at the Muslim world and go, oh, that system's better. Even though if they're being sincere about it, they would. But then that's when you need to transform them to have the right criteria. And then no doubt they would look across and go, that model is a million times better than this model, because look how it looks after its people. Look how their leaders are like the Abdul Hamids of the past and the Sahaba of the past, you know. So we have genuine examples. Maybe we don't have any examples now, but we have genuine examples where, you know, what a leader should be, how politics should be, how this power struggle we see between the rulership and the people shouldn't be there. And that only comes from Islam, nothing else.
Yeah, subhanAllah. But I never even looked at it like that. So, you know, it may not be an issue of justice and injustice. It's just an issue of, well, why can he do it and get away with it and I can't?
Yeah.
SubhanAllah.
I'm not saying not everybody, but
course.
there's more. Yeah, there's more like that now than me. I've just been contemplating a bit about it, and I think there's some people who fall into that category. Yeah,
well, I think a lot of people do, and that's negative. But if that's the environment you've been brought up in, where it's to do with materialism and basically becoming number one, you know, by all means necessary and all this sort of thing, then that's how you will be thinking. I guarantee you, if you did surveys with people, a lot of younger people, and you said, you know, if you could become this, would you do this? You'll be surprised and be shocked by the sort of results. But bro, inshallah ta'ala, we've lost Brother Afi. I think that last point was too hard for him to absorb, man, and his not just him, but his internet connection disconnected as well. But no, interesting discussion, bro.
Definitely.
You know, so I mean, just to get your final thoughts, really, if you do have any, before we end, really, on any of the segments.
Not many final thoughts, but just like all of these topics that we covered, massively expose the current world order. They massively expose the fact that capitalism is the dominant ideology. They expose that democracy is something that is being pushed, even via, you know, like the 100 women's list, and, you know, Boris Johnson and what's happening in our lands. So they're all actually linked to this idea of capitalism as the dominant ideology, democracy as a way that's being pushed that doesn't really exist, but is still being exported to our lands, and the misery of people under it. And then they're all still linked, even to the Emma Watson, even to the Palestinian cause. A lot of these issues arose off the back of, the world becoming more secular, the world becoming under capitalism. And I think the listeners just, certainly for myself, the way I would look at it is, if we can see all the ills of the current world order, clearly we need a new world order, and clearly Islam does have the solutions to these things, and that's what we should spend our time discussing when we expose these, ways of life and these issues in the society.
Yeah, sure, bro. I think the only thing I can just add to that is the fact that when we have these discussions and when we talk about, the situation of the Muslims, and not just the Muslims, the situation of people around the globe, and the the exploitation and the misery that people suffer with the current world order, it's not just for the sake of talking about it. It's for people to reflect upon. And like you said, if you know that there's a poison, then surely you look for a cure. And this is on each one of us to actually think, you know what? Okay, right now it might not be affecting me directly, but all the stories we spoke about today affect us in one way, in one shape or another, whether it's to do with Palestine, whether it's to do with what they want to do with women. Yeah, because we have wives, we have daughters, we have relatives, and even this issue to with the Boris Johnson and the lying and the because not just the Muslims that live in this system, but also for those who in the Muslim lands where they're trying to export this. So no, Jazakallah khair, bro, on that. And I think we should end it there. Brother Aftab is just has reawoken. So I will just ask him for his final thoughts. If he just join, if he doesn't, then we'll inshallah ta'ala end it there.
Yeah, sorry about that. My son decided to switch the router off.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Just your bro, Rash is giving his final thoughts, so really just gonna end the podcast. If you got any final thoughts you want to add before I...
Yeah, it was a point I was going to make before you switched it off, and I think it sums up every other segment as well. That you talked about the quality and the caliber of our rulers throughout history. You gave the example of Muhammad Sallallahu as the statesman, great statesman he was, Umar ibn Khattab, and we've got numerous examples. And I think Muhammad Sallallahu aside, because he was the messenger and he was led by revelation, let's look at the average man with the Khalifs that came after him. What made them great wasn't just them, it was the caliber of the people who had appointed them. Because the caliber of the people, knowing what it is that they wanted to be implemented, and then held the guys, the rulers, the Khalifs to account. We've got numerous examples throughout the history, not just with them, but with other Khalifs up until Abdul Hamid, may Allah be pleased with him as well. We've got numerous examples of when they allowed themselves to be held account, because that's one of the principles of the Islamic ruling system, which is that the authority, that's the responsibility for applying the rule lies with every single Muslim. And throughout history, Muslims assumed that responsibility and held the rulers account. So therefore, in order to return to those glory days, and this is the message I want everyone, and then you apply throughout the 3 segments that we attach, if you want great rulers, you need to be great yourself. Because the rulers are only a reflection of the caliber of the people. So we as Muslims need to turn back, hold firm to Islam, understand what Allah has required from us in order for the rulers to do it.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah.
Brilliant point.
Yeah, no, summed up brilliant. And again, if I was just to add to that, is this then brings responsibility back home.
Yep.
It's easy for us to just be critics, armchair critics, but we need to really look at ourselves and see what role we play, whatever it is, whatever the role is.
We become fatalistic then. It's always about, when's the next Abdul Hamid coming? When's the next Salahuddin coming? When's the Mahdi coming? And that's that's a negative way of thinking and a fatalistic way of thinking. I agree with Afi completely. I think, again, it's not trying to achieve the moon. It's trying to go, what steps can I do in my capability to try to get the ummah to where it needs to be? Or what what little steps can I take to help the greater cause? And if we don't do that, then we're just waiting. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, doesn't he? He's not going to change our condition until we change it ourselves. And that's about, making effort ourselves. And yeah, that's a really wicked point.
Yeah, inshallah, I might get a cap made with the letters MMGA on it. Make Muslims great again. Based on what Afia said. So guys, listen, really Jazakallah for your participation on this podcast. It's a pleasure, really honestly a pleasure to touch base with you. We try once a week, but if not, every fortnight. And I'm sure the audience, the listeners, those watching this have benefited from your input as much as I have as well. And for all those listening, as you know, the Islamic Vibes podcast is available on all popular podcast platforms and also on my YouTube channel, Path to Revival. So on that note, brothers, inshallah ta'ala, Jazakallah khair for joining me today. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.